Hello, Professor Strelnyk. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hello, everybody, and thanks for inviting me for this interview. Well, I am a sociologist. I am a gender researcher, publicist from Ukraine, and a mom of two. It is important to understand my identity as a scholar and researcher. Because actually before the war started, I studied mostly very peaceful topics of gender relations, on unpaid care work. I have published my book about mothering in Ukraine and the situation of women from different groups. They were in my focus as well. And now I'm a displaced person who came to Germany in the March of this year.
You have described some aspect of your work, but you must be doing something very special. Last week, your talk at a conference, Voices from Ukraine, History of Women Philosophers and Scientists in the Situation of War, was very impressive. And by the way, I want to add that this conference was a cooperation between Professor Katerina Karpenko, Director of the Center for Gender Studies, Kharkiv National Medical University, please bear with me with the pronunciation, and Professor Ruth Edith Argen-Gruber, the Director of the Center for the History of Women's Philosophers and Scientists. So, as you said, more than 3 months ago, Russia launched a full-scale war against Ukraine, bringing death, suffering, devastation, and changing the established way of life. How has the war changed your life? You were saying something, but you can now inform us about what's going on.
Well, I would like to start my thoughts about my identity as a scholar, as a researcher. To be honest, over the last 3 months, I have not read any book, any paper. I have not written any papers or article because I could not I was not able to understand if it's possible to make any kind of research under the huge of trauma or to make some kind of interviews with women from Ukraine. Now, personally, I'm just trying to explore somehow how the war affected women in Ukraine and gender roles and gender expectations, and wondering on what the war means actually for feminist movement in Ukraine. Other thing that I'm trying to be somehow helpful for women who do not have enough voices to speak loudly here in Europe. I mean, definitely women refugees. And now we are conducting one research with some of my colleagues from Ukraine about the situation of displaced women who came to Poland, and with a particular focus on mothers of preschool children, because now we see that they have very lack of institutional support. For example, childcare services, affordable childcare services. I suppose that this problem is acute as well, not only for Poland, but for other countries from European Union. And that's why actually these women, they cannot walk and to have some kind of financial security for them. But about the effect on my personal life, it's hardly to find the appropriate words, because actually all my previous life was, to be honest, was destroyed somehow. I mean, from the physical point of view, I came to Germany from the relatively safe place in Ukraine. Originally, I am from Poltava region. It's a central part of Ukraine, and our region was protected somehow by Sumy and Kharkiv region, where, as you know, probably there were a lot of hostilities, and there are still some hostilities and bombing in Kharkiv region. I mean that probably you understand that there is no we do not have absolutely safe space, safe places, safe cities in Ukraine, because all cities, all regions, they have from time to time, they are like under some kind of bombing and attacks. And at the beginning, actually, I was definitely in a huge stress. You can imagine that I could not eat, I could not sleep, I could not drink, I could not make any kind of decisions for my family. And I suppose that it was typical for a lot of people in Ukraine. And at the beginning, actually, when the war started, I thought that I could be brave to stay in Ukraine and to help people as a volunteer. And I definitely helped a lot for displaced, internally displaced people who came to my city, and I helped them with some kind of housing, like everybody actually in Ukraine. But at the same time, when I firstly heard the air raid alarms, and that days I stayed alone in my apartment in Poltava, and when I actually heard this, it was absolutely awful. I was in a huge stress. I was absolutely shocked by this. And that days, actually, I got the invitation from Technical University of Munich. They invited me to visit Munich and to continue my researches. And me and my family, actually, we made a decision that we should go to Munich, and actually I'm here now with my kids.
But in order to understand a bit, you know, from abroad, what's going on in Ukraine, would be interesting if you could tell us what happened in the last 30 years in Ukraine.
Yeah, it's not so easy to explain it in a few words, but I will try. Starting from when Ukraine got its independence in the beginning, actually in 1991. During all our history, we tried to build our like national identity, right? And especially it was obvious after the events of so-called Euromaidan revolution, or revolution of dignity, that started in 2013, when Ukrainian society, a lot of people, they expected that the ex-president of Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, we expected that he would sign the agreement with association with European Union. But he did not do this because of the impact of Russia, because Russian President Putin was against this, was against the European integration of Ukraine. And then we had the huge so-called, again, Maidan revolution, right? It was the first marker, the first indicator that Ukrainian, they would not want to be, the majority of Ukrainian people, they would not want to be a satellite of Russia. So what I mean that Ukraine is not the part of Russian culture. We're trying to build our own identity. And to be honest, we do not consider, especially now when we see what is the result of Putin's invasion and Russian troops' invasion to Ukraine, we see that actually we are not brothers, because this is very typical for Russian propaganda to speak about Ukrainian people and Russian people as so-called brotherhood nations, but we are not brothers actually. Now we can see this definitely.
Yes, but in these years, you are a young person. In this year, what influenced you and what made you the person you are today? Was this idea of democracy important? And you know, usually democracy and women's rights go together.
Well, to be honest, I feel myself as I kind of disintegrated, to be honest, in many small fragments or in many small pieces, and I'm trying to assemble myself or to collect myself into the new identity, into the new quality. And yes, at least I have some strong feelings. The first one is the guilt. There is very like kind of phenomenon, so-called a guilt of the survivor, that actually I'm still alive, and like my family members, they are alive, they are like comparatively okay, right? But there are a lot of people who are died in Ukraine, and I feel myself like I'm not able, I'm still can't help them actually, right, to protect them, and a lot of pain, which I can describe it actually. And to be honest, again, I have lost somehow my personal belief in human beings, in humanity, in world security system, because it's actually I could not imagine that the world or world security system actually we did not. So after the Second World War, after the Holocaust, right? Actually, we still have almost the same human tragedy. And it seems that nothing works anymore, right? No agreements, no negotiations, no international security, nothing works. And it seems that everything that is works, it's a kind of a force, a military force. Who has this force, right? Like kind of Putin and his troops. And they can impact on everything. So that is the huge tragedy for me as a scholar and as a woman, as a human being.
Okay, you are a scientist. So let's go back to science to find some strength. What do you enjoy most about working in sociology? I mean, I know you cannot enjoy that much now, but in general.
Yeah, that is a good question. Actually, this helps me actually to feel myself alive, because when I know that many people, many women, they do not have the same privilege as me of being in a safe place, right? And I may use this privilege to speak about my country and on behalf of my country. What is more inspired me that sociology may actually empowers women, especially if we're talking about a so-called feminist approach. I'm a feminist scholar. It means that I do researchers about women and for women, right? And for some kind of political changes. And when actually I did my postdoctoral research, and I did my book about mothering in Ukraine, I felt myself as like very helpful to give the voices for women mothers who are still, like, let's say, to be honest, still invisible in Ukraine. And one of my informants, I collected some data from interviews with mothers in Ukraine. And one of my informants, she told me that, well, Olena, I could not imagine that my very ordinary everyday life might be interested for some kind of research, right? Because actually asked my informants about their everyday life as mothers in Ukraine. And to be honest, I had a huge ambition to change somehow the academic discourse in Ukraine. I mean that still family issues and care work are still marginalized topics in Ukrainian sociology, to be honest. And I can't feel that my book changed the situation in academic field itself in Ukraine, but I feel like my book was more useful for mothers in Ukraine. I had a lot of really many presentations of my book in Ukraine, and a lot of mothers beyond the academy, they came to these presentations and they told me that they were inspired by my book. That was important for me as well. Other examples, they have a strong identity as a public scholar. I published a lot of popular media articles, for popular media about gender equality, about women's rights. So I'm ready to share my my knowledge and my experience to make Ukrainian women stronger.
Oh, this is great. But let's talk about your colleagues. There are many, of course, women and men scientists from Ukraine now abroad after Russia started the war against Ukraine. And for example, you have guest invitations from local university or foundations. Which are the problems that you face there, integration into a foreign academic life or the continuation of your career? Especially, you said even that you cannot concentrate and so, but otherwise, which are other problems where we can help maybe?
Yeah, I suppose that, I suppose that everybody would have the chance to back to Ukraine as soon as possible, right? But it seems that the war will not stop immediately. And sooner or later, many women who came here to Germany, they face with the new challenge of integration in the German academy. And I'm afraid that many brilliant scholars came here to Germany, but I'm afraid that in general, we had the, less opportunities to form a strong competitive position in the Western academic community. Personally, I'm not very smart, and I do not know in details how the academic system here in Germany or in other countries they work, and it will be the challenge for me, definitely. But now I see that from time to time the different kind of workshops they are conducted for Ukrainian scholars to help them to learn more, to have more knowledge about the system of academic work here in Europe. So it seems that some kind of responses they are forming at the moment. And you're right that my refugee status is the additional burden for me because, I still have a lot of challenges for organizing my everyday life. I have a lot of challenges to contact constantly with different state authorities, right? To get some responses for my emails. A lot of women, they need to provide childcare. And elderly relatives, because the majority of women who came here in Europe, they came with families, right? There are huge problems with housing. Okay, now I have a very nice family who hosted me, but I feel like sooner or later I need to find my own housing. And I'm monitoring the program of support for Ukrainian scientists and see that the websites of most of these programs that state that applications for Ukrainian refugees are not longer accepted. However, I already have to think about my future, what I will do when my scholarship ends. And I have a rather, again, weak understanding of the peculiarities of the German academic environment. I have a wonderful guest professor, to be honest, here in Technical University of Munich, but I feel that I have to rely on myself mostly and to be proactive somehow.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, the academic life in Germany is, many Germans don't understand it as well. So it is, you know what I mean. Okay, but you were also working on the pandemic and the risk of violence against women and, of course, kids when they were at home, sheltered. And so can you tell something about that too? Because this leads us to the next questions, you know, which are the risks for women in a situation of war? That
is very important question. It's pity that actually domestic violence was not in my particular field of my expertise. But what I can see definitely now what worries me, that this is the lack of information about the cases of domestic violence now in the situation of war. So for sure, we know from different data that all wars, they provoke the rising of number of cases of domestic violence, because a lot of people, a lot of men, they have some kind of trauma because of the war, right? Especially if we're talking about ex-combatants. And people, they, because of huge economic crisis, a lot of people, a lot of men, for example, they lost their jobs, and it makes provoke the huge stress for them, and the domestic violence as a result as well. But what I see now, we do not have, okay, when during the pandemic, we had a huge rising of public interest toward the topic of family violence, because we observed that COVID affected negatively on this situation. But now, in the situation of war, we still, at the moment, we do not have any particular discourse on domestic violence in Ukraine. But this problem will be worsened definitely, because one of the additional problem that a lack of the relevant services for women who are victims of domestic violence, because now in Ukraine a lot of shelters for women, we have a lot of not many, but we have shelters for women, but a lot of these shelters, they were used as a housing for internally displaced people, right? It means that in this case there is no place for women who are victims of domestic violence. So the lack of services, that is a huge problem.
Yes, but I don't actually want to touch the problem of rape during war. That is, but it's impossible to avoid that. And you were mentioning something about ethnicity at the conference when I heard you the first time, and it was really impressive what you said about ethnicity, because you were mentioning this Russian wife telling the husband that is a soldier, it's not so bad if you rape a woman from Ukraine. Can you tell us what did you say again? Because this is incredible. I mean, solidarity among women doesn't work in a situation of war.
Yes, absolutely. Now we have at least 400 cases which were officially registered of rape, but we definitely understand that the real numbers of these cases are much higher. And there are some cases of rape of very young girls and women and boys and men as well, right? And Ukraine now currently tries to build this system of helping for these victims. But yeah, what I have mentioned that. We have some evidences based on records of telephone communications of some Russian soldiers with their wives who stayed in Russia. And according to this recording, there are some cases when their wives, they actually, let's say, allow them to rape, and said something like, okay, if you rape Ukrainian woman, it's not so bad, but you should not tell me about this. So it's almost the quotation of these records. And yes, and according to the data of ex-Human Rights Commissioner Lyudmila Denisova, there were some quotations when women they told what Russian soldiers told them during the rape, it was based on ethnicity as well, because there are, for instance, some messages when these women be told that we will rape you for you not, and you will not be able to give birth to Ukrainian children, or to your, or because you are so-called Nazis prostitute, something like that. And yes, I do not believe after these cases in female solidarity in general.
Oh, there are no words to comment that. This, yeah. But you are a specialist on the ethics of care, and this covers also the environmental consequences of war. No one is talking about that, and you know, there is this movement of ecofeminism. They say that nature and women are treated in the same negative way by a patriarchal society, but let's stay on the environmental consequences of war, because no one is really mentioning that. Can you tell us something about that?
Yeah, I would say that it's not like the field of my expertise, but yeah, definitely. I would say that in Ukraine, we have this discourse, and many ecofeminists from Ukraine, they try to collect the evidences and to inform people about the threat, for nature, right? So I can say that we do not have any kind of particular information of this, but definitely you are absolutely right. And one of the fact that actually pushed me to flee from Ukraine, it was the messages at the beginning of the war. It was messages about the attacks on Chernobyl, a nuclear station, and Zaporizhzhia nuclear station, right? Because for a couple of weeks they were occupied by Russian troops, and I felt myself, you know, it seems it's very like silly, but can you imagine that actually I scrolled news and I had read a lot of information how to protect myself and my family in the case of nuclear weapon be used. And me and my mom, we even prepare the basement with water and food in case nuclear weapon would be used. So yes, it's absolutely like kind of a disaster, definitely. But what I would like to add, that the new kind of the new kind of care ethics is appearing in Ukraine. What I like following by the media messages and following by the visual representations of war in Ukraine, I see that a lot of attention is paid for pets, for animals, right? I mean that a lot of people there, can you imagine that a lot of refugees and internally displaced people there evacuated with their pets, and they did not want to live there in dangerous situation, right? And there are some demands, for instance, from local authorities. I have seen it in media resources that, for instance, we have a huge problem for food for pets. Please help us if you have any foods to bring these into these houses where the internally displaced people, they live with their pets, something like that. So it's kind of it seems that it's kind of positive trend in this perspective.
Oh, thank you for your insights. I now want to ask you, what can we do to support Ukraine? I mean, normal people here in Germany, what can we do to support women scientists living abroad as refugees, for example?
Well, I understand that the easiest thing that you may help for Ukrainian armed forces or civilians. And this is important because enormous money they are spent by ordinary people, by civilians, to support armed forces of Ukraine, to support internally displaced people, to support volunteer groups, right? So people, they spend just enormous money for buying necessary thing for soldiers, something like that. And we have the strong expectation that actually we have the huge economic crisis. A lot of people, they lost their jobs. Many salaries, especially in government or public sector, they are cut somehow because, you know, we have the deficit of our budget. And the problem with the definitely will be worsened during the next months and years. So I mean that people in Ukraine, they are financially absolutely exhausted to support armed forces. So if you have any kind of information of any kind of funds, you may just transfer some money. This is, you know, the easiest thing to do. What about scholars? We definitely need some kind of support to promote institutional challenges in Europe when supporting Ukrainian studies, because Ukrainian studies, they are mostly go under the umbrella of Russian or East European studies. But now we would like to emphasize again that I actually told you before that we are not a satellite of Russia. We try to build our own personal, strong personal national identity or civic identity, because actually Ukraine is multi-ethnical state. We have a lot of many nationalities living in Ukraine. And the third one, what you may actually use, give priority for Ukrainians to speak about the war, invite Ukrainians to comment media materials, invite Ukrainians to participate in your research team, especially if we are talking about doing research about the situation in war in Ukraine. Because now, following the different media resources, I can see that, for instance, a lot of materials, they are devoted to the situation on women and the war in Ukraine. A lot of, if you just try to find it via Google Scholar, you will see this, but very few, they have experts from Ukraine who comment the situation.
Oh. And do you have a message for our users in general now? Especially, you know, there are so many fake news and people saying something and then the opposite of something. And if you don't have a real preparation, you are maybe lost. What would you say to our users?
Yeah, I have probably one message. Me and Ukrainian scholars, Ukrainian people and feminists, by the way, we were upset when we saw some statements by Western intellectuals and some statements that were made even by feminists to not supply weapons to Ukraine because the risk of escalation of the war. When it is possible, I was a pacifist as a feminist before the war, definitely, right? I did not support, as many of my colleagues from feminist movement, we did not support militarization or something like that. But it is possible to speak about peace and to be, pacifist if you are actually do not really expect any kind of invasion, right? Or if we are talking about the imaginable war, or imaginable Russian soldiers, but not about the real soldiers who rape Ukrainian women and girls, right? So what I would like to offer, because it's very offensive, really offensive, do not call or do not offer Ukraine to capitulate or to sign agreements with Putin, because especially in the context of food crisis, especially in the context of energy crisis, it seems that it's fertile soil for strengthening this discourse that, that we should make an agreement with Putin, or we see some kind of delay in supplying weapon of Ukraine, or I can observe that statements of politicians, they are becoming more and more careful. Do not angry Putin. But what I would like to say that it's not Ukraine's fault in food crisis in the world. It's not Ukraine's fault in energy crisis in Europe, but it's only the Putin's fault, the fault of Russian troops and the fault of many Russian people who support the war and support this invasion and very colonial politics of Russian state. So we have to stop them, but not Ukraine, because Ukraine is literally fighting for our physical survival and our national identity.
Oh, great. Great that you said that, because you said already, there are many voices, so it is important to listen to your voices from Ukraine and not from, other voices coming from other situations that are not situation of wars. So it's a very different kind of voice then. But we want now to conclude with something. We give you, if you could have a wish, what would it be? I just, imagination is huge.
I suppose that my response will be very obvious. But it's pity when even the war, stops like in the next few months. It's pity that actually my life will never be the same as it was before the war. And yes, so I have only one desire. I suppose all Ukrainians, we would be happy if the war would be stopped immediately.
Yeah, okay, but under condition of integrity and integrity of the territory and respect of your wishes, democracy and whatsoever. I understand that, and it's of course a right that everyone should respect. Yeah, I thank you. I thank you very much for your time and for your words. And let's hope that everything is gonna be good in the end. And yeah, I'm sorry, but there are no words more that I can say. But okay. You have our solidarity, and keep safe and strong. Thank you.
Thank you for your invitation, and I would like to apologize because I do not have the particular private space for this interview, and and my camera is not very good because I came here with only my laptop, right? So, but thank you very much for your interest in Ukraine and for giving me these possibilities to speak on behalf of my country.